The year is 1942, and 5 aircraft sit on the tarmac, each representing a different path for Japan's aerial future. There's a German Messerschmitt Bf-109E, freshly imported from the Reich, an American Curtiss B-40E Warhawk, captured during recent battles, and 3 Japanese fighters, the nimble K-143 Hayabusa, the powerful KY-44 Shoki, and the mysterious newcomer that has everyone talking. Imperial Japanese Army Air Force commanders eye the unknown aircraft with skepticism. It looks nothing like the fighters they're used to. While their proven warbirds feature air-cooled radial engines and prioritize maneuverability above all else, this strange machine boasts a long, tapered nose, housing a liquid-cooled inverted V engine. Its designers at Kawasaki claim it represents the future of Japanese fighter aviation. One by one, the aircraft take to the sky. The evaluation begins with climbing tests, speed runs, and maneuverability demonstrations. The skeptical officers watch from the ground as their assumptions crumble. The newcomer, designated K-161, systematically outperforms every competitor except the KY-43 in pure turning ability. Its 1,175 horsepower liquid-cooled engine propels it faster than anything in Japan's arsenal. As the aircraft lands, the officers' doubt has transformed into outright awe. They have just witnessed the birth of Japan's most revolutionary fighter, the Kawasaki K-161 Hien, destined to become the Allies' most feared interceptor. The story of Japan's liquid-cooled fighter begins not in the skies over the Pacific, but in the design offices of Nazi Germany. Throughout the 1930s, while Japan perfected its philosophy of lightweight, maneuverable fighters powered by air-cooled radial engines, Europe was embracing a different approach. Nations like Germany were developing powerful liquid-cooled inline engines that promised greater speeds and higher altitude performance. Japan found itself technologically isolated. While America introduced the Allison V1710 engine in 1937, and Germany perfected the Daimler-Benz DB601, Japan remained dependent on air-cooled radials. This gap threatened Japan's aviation supremacy as war clouds gathered over the Pacific. Kawasaki Aircraft Engineering Company had long been different from other Japanese manufacturers. Between 1923 and 1933, their chief designer was German engineer Dr. Richard Vogt, who would later become famous at Blohm und Voss. Even after Vogt returned to Germany, Kawasaki remained committed to liquid-cooled engine technology, making them heretics in the world that worshipped the radial engine. After losing the K-128 contract to Nakajima's K-127, Kawasaki executives made a bold decision. They would approach their German allies directly. In April 1940, a Japanese technical team arrived in Stuttgart, carrying briefcases full of Reich marks and dreams of technological transformation. Daimler-Benz agreed to license their latest DB601A engine, the same power plant that made the Messerschmitt Bf-109 a terror over Europe. The Germans provided not just blueprints, but several complete engines delivered by submarine. Kawasaki's engineers immediately began adapting the design for Japanese production techniques at their Akashi plant. The challenge was immense. The DB601 demanded precision manufacturing that pushed Japanese industrial capabilities to their limits. By July 1941, the first Japanese-built engine was complete. Designated HA-40, it was actually lighter than the German original by 30 kilograms while producing the same power output. Rated at 1,175 horsepower for takeoff and 1,100 horsepower at 13,780 feet, the HA-40 represented a quantum leap in Japanese engine technology. While Kawasaki perfected their engine, designers Takeo Doi and Shin Owada worked feverishly on the airframe. Both men had trained under German engineer Richard Vogt, and their design philosophy showed clear European influence. The K-161 would be Japan's first fighter with armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, and the structural strength to withstand high-speed dives. The aircraft that emerged was unlike anything in Japanese service. The K-161 featured a low-wing, all-metal monoplane construction with a distinctive inverted V-12 engine. Its armored windshield and half-inch rear cockpit plate provided protection Japanese pilots had never enjoyed. Most revolutionary of all were the self-sealing fuel tanks, a feature considered essential in European air combat, but absent from previous Japanese designs. The prototype's maiden flight in December 1941 exceeded all expectations. Test pilots reported a maximum speed of 367 miles per hour at 19,685 feet. More importantly, the aircraft could sustain high-speed dives without structural failure, something that had plagued earlier Japanese fighters when engaging American aircraft. On the morning of April 18, 1942, air raid sirens wailed across Tokyo for the first time in the war. 16 North American B-25 Mitchell bombers had launched from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle on a mission that would shock the Japanese home islands to their core. As the American bombers approached the Japanese coast, pre-production K-161 fighters scrambled in desperate defense. This was the Hien's baptism by fire, its first taste of combat over the sacred soil of Japan itself. Though only a handful of the new fighters were available, they joined K-145 Toryu twin-engine fighters in attempting to intercept the raiders. American Captain C. Ross Greening, flying one of Doolittle's B-25s, spotted Japanese fighters rising to meet them. But these weren't the familiar radial engine interceptors American intelligence had catalogued. These looked entirely different, with long noses and inline engines. In his mission report, Greening identified them as Messerschmitt Bf-109s, convinced that Germany had shared its most advanced fighter with Japan. The confusion was understandable. The K-161 looked so unlike typical Japanese aircraft that Allied intelligence initially refused to believe it was a domestic design. Early reports classified it as either a license-built Messerschmitt or an unknown Italian fighter, leading to the codename Mike. Only later would the Allies settle on Tony, convinced the aircraft resembled Italian designs from companies like Maki. The Doolittle raiders escaped with minimal losses, but their mission accomplished something beyond the physical damage inflicted on Japanese targets. It demonstrated that Japan's home islands were vulnerable to air attack and exposed critical gaps in the homeland's air defense. More importantly for Kawasaki, it provided the K-161 with its combat debut, proving the aircraft could reach altitudes and speeds necessary to intercept American raiders. By August 1942, the first production K-161 rolled off the assembly line at Kawasaki's Kagamigahara plant. Designated Army Type 3 Fighter Model 1, Hien, the aircraft entered service with devastating effect. Armed initially with two 12.7mm HO-103 machine guns in the fuselage and a 7.7mm Type 89 machine gun in each wing, the Hien packed considerably more firepower than earlier Japanese fighters. The early production models, designated K-161-1A and Ki-61-1B, differed primarily in their wing armament configuration. The K-161-1B featured 12.7mm guns in both fuselage and wings, creating a formidable weapons platform. These aircraft could carry two 200-liter drop tanks for extended range missions, crucial for Pacific combat operations. By early 1943, the KY-61 was ready for its greatest test, combat in the Pacific theater, where it would face the growing might of American aviation. The spring of 1943 brought the Hien to the front lines of the Pacific War. The first units to receive the new fighter were the 68th and 78th Sentai, elite squadrons tasked with replacing their aging K-127 fighters. These units represented Japan's best pilots, veterans of campaigns in China and the early Pacific battles. The transition wasn't smooth. Unlike the lightweight, forgiving handling of previous Japanese fighters, the KY-61 demanded respect. Its high wing loading of 29.9 pounds per square foot was criticized by military pilots accustomed to the instant responsiveness of the Zero and Oscar. But those who mastered the aircraft discovered its unique advantages: devastating diving speed, heavy armor protection, and firepower that could shred American bombers. In May 1943, the 68th and 78th Sentai deployed to the Southwest Pacific, with the 68th Sentai establishing operations at Wewak on New Guinea's northeastern coast. Here, they would face their ultimate test against General George Kenney's 5th Air Force. The American pilots got their first shock when they encountered the KY-61 over New Guinea in June 1943. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Cragg, leading a formation of Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, found his aircraft completely outclassed by the mysterious Japanese fighters. The Americans could no longer simply dive away from combat, as they had against lighter Japanese aircraft. The Hien could match their diving speed and possessed superior firepower. General Kenney frantically requested more Lockheed P-38 Lightnings to counter this new threat. In his reports to Washington, he emphasized the urgency. These new Japanese fighters are faster than our P-40As, better armed, and can take more punishment. We need every Lightning we can get. The Hien's combat effectiveness came from more than just speed and firepower. Unlike previous Japanese fighters, it featured genuine survivability. The armored windshield could stop rifle-caliber bullets, while the half-inch armor plate behind the pilot provided protection against rear attacks. Most crucially, the self-sealing fuel tanks meant that Hien pilots could survive hits that would have been fatal in a Zero or Oscar. Major Shogo Takahashi of the 68th Sentai became one of the Hien's most successful pilots. Operating from Weiwak, Takahashi accumulated 16 confirmed victories before his death in December 1943. His tactics emphasized the K-161's strengths: high-speed attacks using superior diving performance, followed by climbing away from enemy formations before they could respond. But the Hien faced serious challenges in the tropical Pacific environment. The sophisticated liquid-cooled engine proved temperamental in jungle conditions. High temperatures caused fuel pump failures, while the complex cooling system required constant maintenance by skilled technicians who were increasingly scarce as the war progressed. The 78th Sentai experienced these problems firsthand during their deployment from Truk to Rabaul. Of 30 K-161s that attempted the transit, more than half were lost to mechanical failures or forced landings. Survivors limped to their destinations with overheating engines and damaged cooling systems, requiring extensive repairs before returning to combat status. Despite these mechanical challenges, the Hien units achieved remarkable success against Allied aircraft. In one engagement over Weiwak, 12 K-161s intercepted a formation of 48 Allied bombers and fighters. The Japanese pilots claimed 18 victories while losing only 3 aircraft, demonstrating the Hien's combat potential when properly employed. The aircraft's unique characteristics forced American pilots to develop new tactics. The traditional boom and zoom attacks that worked against other Japanese fighters were less effective against the heavily armored Hien. Instead, American pilots learned to exploit the aircraft's relatively poor low-speed maneuverability, forcing extended turning engagements where numerical superiority could be brought to bear. By late 1943, combat experience led to improvements in the KY-61 design. The introduction of the KI-61-1-KAIC variant addressed many pilot concerns. This version featured simplified construction for easier field maintenance and replaced the fuselage-mounted 12.7mm guns with two 20mm H-05 cannons, dramatically increasing firepower against American bombers. The strengthened wings allowed higher diving speeds and incorporated provisions for external stores, including bombs for ground attack missions. The retractable tailwheel was replaced with a fixed unit, simplifying construction and reducing weight. Most importantly, the revised design proved more reliable in tropical conditions, though engine problems persisted throughout the war. As 1944 dawned, Japan faced a new and terrifying threat. Boeing B-29. Superfortresses began appearing over Japanese industrial targets, flying at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet where most Japanese fighters couldn't reach them. The massive bombers represented America's technological supremacy made manifest, and Japan's response would lead the K-161 into its most desperate role. The crisis began on August 29, 1944, when B-29s from Chinese airfields attempted to bomb the steel factories at Yawata. Among the Japanese pilots scrambling to intercept was Sergeant Shigeo Nobe of the 4th Sentai, flying a Kawasaki K-145 Toryu twin-engine fighter. Realizing his aircraft's guns couldn't penetrate the B-29's heavy armor at the bomber's cruising altitude, Nobe made a radical decision and directly rammed his aircraft into the massive American monster. The audacious act destroyed not only Nobe's target, but damaged another B-29 with debris from the explosion. This sacrifice caught the attention of Japan's increasingly desperate high command, who began ordering more attacks of this nature. By November 7, 1944, ramming attacks became official policy, with dedicated flights formed specifically to challenge B-29s at their lofty altitudes. For this perilous mission, one aircraft stood out above all others, the K-161. Its liquid-cooled engine could propel it to altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet where B-29s operated, while its potent 4-cannon array packed the punch needed to bring down these flying fortresses. To maximize altitude performance, these Hiens were stripped down, their fuselage armament and protective systems sacrificed for the ability to reach the stratosphere. Captain Takashi Fujita, commander of the 244th Fighter Group, assembled a ramming flight dubbed Huga Kutai, or Special Attack Unit. Composed of volunteers from 3 squadrons and led by First Lieutenant Taro Shimada, these men knew their mission was likely suicidal, While the Imperial Air Force didn't officially label these ramming missions as kamikaze attacks, the nature of their task was unmistakable. On December 3, 1944, Lieutenant Shimada and his two wingmen, Sergeants Masao Itagaki and Matsuno Nakano, took to the skies over Japan to intercept an incoming B-29 raid. After spotting their massive targets, Shimada aimed his K-161 at a superfortress and collided with devastating force. Despite losing most of his wing, Shimada managed to land his crippled fighter back at base, becoming the first pilot to survive a successful ramming attack. In these, Sergeant Itagaki engaged another B-29 in a fierce duel, his aircraft battered from the encounter before he was forced to bail out and parachute to safety. The third pilot, Sergeant Nakano, executed what witnesses called a perfect ram on a B-29 from the U.S. Army Air Force's 498th Bombardment Group. Like his leader, Nakano skillfully guided his damaged K-161 to a controlled crash landing in a nearby field. After this successful mission, the three Hien pilots became the first recipients of the Bukosho, Japan's equivalent to the Medal of Honor, which had been inaugurated just days before by Emperor Hirohito. While the existence of this elite ramming unit had been kept confidential, the announcement of the three men's awards saw it officially revealed and named the Shinten Seiku Tai, or Body Attack Detachment. From then until the war's end, a total of 89 men received this merit, most fighting and scoring against B-29s while piloting K-161s. On January 27, 1945, Sergeant Itagaki survived another ramming attack on a B-29, again parachuting to safety. He received a second Bukosho, becoming one of only two double recipients and the only man to survive the conflict. Despite their successful attacks against one of the most intimidating Allied aircraft of the war, these pilots gained no respite. They were forced to continue these dangerous ramming tactics until they were killed, wounded too badly to fly, or the war ended. With each mission, Japan was losing its most experienced and courageous aviators in desperate attempts to stem the tide of American bombing. The beginning of 1945 brought catastrophic changes to the K-161 program. On January 19th, American bombers destroyed the Akashi engine plant, where HF-40 power plants were manufactured. This devastating blow left hundreds of completed airframes without engines, forcing Kawasaki to develop an emergency solution. The result was the K-1100, a high-end variant fitted with a Mitsubishi HA-112-2 radial engine. While this modification solved the liquid cooling problems that had plagued the design, it also eliminated the K-161's high-altitude advantages, reducing its effectiveness against B-29 bombers. Meanwhile, the remaining K-161s fought until the very end of the war. They defended Formosa against American carrier raids, engaged Marine Corps fighters over Okinawa, and intercepted B-29 formations over the Japanese home islands. Each mission brought fresh losses to units that could no longer be adequately replaced or resupplied. The aircraft that had once been hailed as Japan's answer to American technological superiority now served in increasingly desperate roles. Some K-161s were converted to actual kamikaze aircraft, their liquid-cooled engines providing the speed and altitude needed to penetrate American defenses. Others served in operational training units, preparing new pilots for combat in aircraft that were becoming increasingly obsolete. By war's end, nearly 2,000 K-161s had been lost in air attacks from up to 200 Allied aircraft at a time. The primary attackers were consolidated B-24 Liberators and North American B-25 Mitchells armed with fragmentation bombs, specifically designed to destroy aircraft on the ground. American forces discovered hundreds of aircraft wrecks scattered across captured airfields, testament to the devastating effectiveness of Allied bombing campaigns. The final statistics tell the story of a revolutionary aircraft overtaken by the pace of technological advancement. Over 3,000 K-161s were produced between August 1942 and January 1945, making it one of Japan's most numerous fighters. For all its advanced features, the Hien arrived too late and in too few numbers to alter the course of the Pacific War. In the end, the Kawasaki K-161 Hien represented both the promise and the limitations of Japanese aviation technology. It was the only mass-produced Japanese fighter to successfully integrate liquid-cooled engine technology, armor protection, and heavy armament into a single design. Its pilots achieved remarkable individual successes, from the jungle airstrips of New Guinea to the ramming attacks over Japan itself. The Hien also demonstrated the challenges facing Japanese industry in total war. The sophisticated HA-40 engine, while powerful, proved difficult to manufacture with consistent quality and maintain in combat conditions. The aircraft's advanced features required skilled technicians and high-quality materials that became increasingly scarce as the war progressed. The K-161 story is ultimately one of brave pilots flying an innovative aircraft under impossible circumstances. From its dramatic debut during the Doolittle Raid to its final ramming attacks against B-29 bombers, the Hien earned its place as one of the most significant fighters of the Pacific War. It challenged Allied air superiority when Japan needed it most, and its pilots' sacrifices in the defense of their homeland deserve remembrance alongside the aircraft they flew into history.